Story 1: The Vanishing Hitchhiker. It was a little after midnight when I found myself driving down a long stretch of rural highway. I had been on the road for hours already, and there wasn't another car in sight. Just me, my old sedan, and the endless blackness stretching out in front of me. The only light came from my headlights, cutting through the fog that had started to settle low across the road. The radio had given up on reception about 40 miles back, so the only sound was the hum of my tires on the cracked asphalt. It was the kind of silence that made your ears ring, that heavy, unnatural silence that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. That's when I saw her. Up ahead, barely visible at first, was a figure on the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It wouldn't be the first time fatigue had made me hallucinate shadows on long drives. But as I got closer, I could see it was a young woman. She was standing in the beam of my headlights, clutching her arms around herself, her long hair hanging over her face. She looked terrified, or freezing, maybe both. I slowed down, rolling my window halfway as I pulled up beside her. "Hey!" I called out, my voice echoing weirdly in the night air. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride?" She looked up at me, and I'll never forget the expression on her face. It wasn't relief, like you'd expect if someone stranded in the middle of nowhere finally got help. It was hollow. Her eyes looked sunken, almost bruised, but she nodded slowly. I unlocked the passenger door. "Hop in. Where are you headed?" She didn't answer right away. She just slid into the seat, her hands trembling in her lap. I noticed she wasn't carrying a purse, a phone, nothing at all. Just a thin dress that looked like it belonged to another decade. After a few minutes of silence, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a house, a little further down this road. Can you take me there?" I nodded. After about 10 minutes, I finally saw what looked like a dirt driveway up ahead. She leaned forward suddenly, pointing. "Here," she said. "This is it." I slowed down and pulled over. The driveway looked abandoned, overgrown with weeds. At the end of it was nothing but darkness. No lights, no house that I could see. When I turned to ask her if she was sure, she was gone. The seat beside me was empty. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't seen her get out. She had just vanished. I sat there in shock for what felt like forever, staring at the empty seat, my mind racing for an explanation. Finally, I worked up the nerve to get out of the car. The night was colder now, unnaturally so, and the fog had thickened around me. I walked to the passenger side, opened the door, half expecting her to be crouched down or hiding. But there was nothing, not even footprints in the dirt. Then I noticed something. On the seat where she had been sitting was a faint damp spot, like someone had been sitting there with soaked clothes. The smell hit me a second later, a faint, musty scent, like pond water. I didn't stick around to investigate. I got back into my car, slammed the doors shut, and floored it down the highway, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. Later, when I stopped for gas at a small town, I mentioned what happened to the clerk. The old man froze, staring at me with wide eyes. Then he nodded slowly. "You picked her up, didn't you?" he said, almost like it wasn't a question. "She's been around here for years. Died in a car crash on that road. Folks say she's still trying to get home." I didn't sleep that night. In fact, even now, years later, every time I drive at night and see a figure on the side of the road, I keep driving, because I know if I stop, she might be waiting for me again. Story 2: The Man in the Rearview Mirror. I've always loved night drives. There's something peaceful about being alone on the road. No traffic, no distractions. Just the hum of the engine and miles of highway ahead of you. But after what happened to me a few years back, I don't take late-night drives anymore. It started on a Friday night. I had just finished visiting a friend out in the countryside, and I was heading home. The trip should have taken about an hour, mostly back roads with long, lonely stretches of asphalt cutting through fields and woods. The kind of roads where your high beams barely seem to touch the darkness. For the first 20 minutes, everything was fine. The road was empty, and the sky was a blank, starless black. I was about halfway through fiddling with the radio when I noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just another car, probably heading in the same direction. But the way those headlights stayed glued to me, it started to feel off. I sped up a little, and so did they. I slowed down, and they matched my pace perfectly. After a few minutes of this, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Whoever it was, they weren't just driving behind me, they were following me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just coincidence. But then they flashed their high beams at me. Not once, not twice, over and over again in a pattern. Flash, 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 flash. It didn't feel like a signal. It felt like a game. I decided to take the next turn, a narrow road that veered off into the woods. Hardly anyone used it, but I figured it'd prove whether or not I was being followed. Sure enough, the car turned right after me. My chest tightened. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. This went on for miles. No matter how many turns I took, how fast or slow I went, that car was always there. Headlights burning into my rearview mirror, high beams flickering at random. I tried calling The car slowed down too, pulling up about 50 feet behind me. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just two cars sitting on a deserted road in the middle of the night, engines idling. Then their driver's side door opened. I squinted through the mirror, trying to make out their face, but it was too dark. All I could see was a tall figure stepping out, moving slowly toward my car. Instinct took over. I slammed my foot on the gas and shot forward, tires screeching against the pavement. In the rearview, I saw them sprint back to their car, diving inside before peeling out after me. What followed was the most terrifying chase of my life. My car rattled as I pushed it faster and faster, every turn nearly sending me off the road. But no matter how reckless I drove, that car stayed right behind me, their headlights never wavering. Finally, up ahead, I saw salvation. A gas station, its neon sign flickering like a beacon in the darkness. I swerved into the lot, screeched to a halt by the pumps, and leapt out. The clerk inside must have seen the panic on my face, because he immediately picked up the phone to call the police. I turned to point at the car that had been following me, but it was gone. No taillights disappearing down the road. No sound of an engine fading into the distance. Nothing. Just empty highway and the faint buzz of the gas station lights. The cops showed up about 15 minutes later. I gave them the whole story, every detail, and they nodded like they'd heard it before. One of them finally said, "You're not the first person to report that. Folks around here call him the shadow driver. Shows up on back roads, follows you, then vanishes. Nobody knows who or what it really is. To this day, I can't explain it. All I know is when I look into a rearview mirror at night and I see headlights, my stomach knots up, because I can't shake the fear that it's him again, waiting, playing his game." Story 3. The Abandoned Gas Station. There's something about being low on fuel in the middle of the night that makes you feel completely vulnerable. I learned that the hard way one summer, when a simple drive home turned into the scariest night of my life. I had been on the highway for hours, and my gas gauge was dropping dangerously close to empty. The last town I passed through was 30 miles behind me, and my GPS showed nothing ahead for at least another 40. I started to panic, already imagining myself stranded on the side of the road in pitch-black darkness. That's when I spotted it. A faded sign, barely lit, with one word, gas. An exit veered off the highway, leading to what looked like an old service station. Relief washed over me as I took the turn. The place looked wrong, though. The building was run down, its paint peeling and its windows dark. One of the two overhead lights above the pumps was flickering weakly, buzzing like an insect. There were no other cars, no sound of traffic, just me, pulling up beside a pump that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Still, the pump clicked on when I lifted the nozzle. That should have reassured me. Didn't. While the gas trickled into my tank, I noticed something strange. The store door was slightly open, just enough to creak back and forth with the breeze. "Hello," I called out, more to fill the silence than anything else. No answer. I told myself not to be paranoid. I was just tired. But then I heard it, movement. The sound of shuffling, like footsteps on the tiled floor inside the store. I froze. "Hey!" I called out again. "Is anyone there?" This time, the shuffling stopped. I swear the silence that followed was worse than the sound. The nozzle clicked, my tank full, and I hurried to hang it back up. As I did, I glanced at the store door again, and I saw something. A figure standing just beyond the darkness. Too far back to make out clearly, but close enough that I could see the faint outline of a face watching me. My body screamed at me to get in the car. I fumbled with my keys, practically diving inside before slamming the locks down. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. When I looked up into the rearview mirror, the figure wasn't in the store anymore. It was standing behind my car. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. It was tall, unnaturally thin, its head cocked at an angle too sharp to be human. The flickering light above the pumps buzzed harder, then went out completely. For a split second, the world was pitch black. When the light flickered back on, the figure was gone. I didn't wait to question it. I slammed my car into drive and tore out of that station, tires screaming on the pavement. I didn't care if my tank spilled half the gas, I just needed to get out. When I finally made it back to civilization, I pulled into a diner, shaking and pale. I told the waitress about the gas station. She frowned and shook her head. "Sweetheart, that station's been closed for over 20 years, she said. "Burned down after the owner killed 2 travelers inside. Nobody's been out there since." I swore I was just there. I swore the pump worked, that I saw someone or something. But when I drove back with the police the next day, there was nothing. Just a crumbling foundation, weeds growing through the cracks, and a rusted sign barely hanging on. The pumps? Gone. The lights? Gone. The store? Nothing but ashes and debris. But the strangest part? My gas tank was still full. And every time I check my rearview mirror at night, I half expect to see that figure standing behind me again.